Banking Trends for 2018, Capitalizing on Data-Driven Disruption, sponsored by Appian and hosted by American Banker. I would like to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Mike Sisk. Mike, you now have the floor.
Thanks very much, Christina, and I would like to welcome the audience once again. We are very grateful that you have chosen to share some of your busy day with us. We know that your time is valuable, and we'll honor that with what I'm confident is going to be an enlightening and engaging 60 minutes or so of discussion. Once again, our topic today is Banking Trends for 2018, Capitalizing on Data-Driven Disruption. And my name is Michael Sisk. I will be your moderator today. I've been a New York-based journalist for about 20 years, and I've had stints as editor-at-large at U.S. Banker and contributing editor of Bank Technology News. And my articles have also appeared in American Banker, Barron's, Crane's New York Business, Inc., Institutional Investor, Strategy and Business, and Worth. And I am very pleased to introduce our two speakers today. First is Jost Hoppermann. Jost is the Vice President, Principal Analyst, serving application development and delivery professionals at Forrester. Jost is, as an analyst, he is an expert on a number of architecture and technology topics in global banking, such as off-the-shelf banking platforms, including core banking, mobile banking, online banking, and omni-channel banking, payment and financial risk management solutions, banking architecture, banking platform transformation, architecture, and strategy. He also led research into the business and technology aspects of banking in the future for banking in 2023 and 2030. And we are very, very pleased to have Jost with us today. And joining him is Michael Heffner, Vice President, Global Banking and Capital Markets Lead at Appian. Mike leads Appian's financial services practice globally with an industry team that partners with FS firms to enable their digital transformations. Mike brings over 20 years of experience driving innovation approaches to problem solving within banking and capital markets. Prior to Appian, he was Managing Director, Business Transformation at State Street Global Markets, and also held management roles at Charles Schwab & Company and Accenture. Mike holds a BSBA in Economics from the University of South Carolina and an MBA from Babson College. And we are also very, very happy to have Michael with us today. And just before we jump into the real meat of the discussion, I just wanted to reiterate one thing that Christina mentioned at the very top, and that is that we do have time at the end for questions. Usually we've got about 10 minutes or so, 10 or 15 minutes perhaps, and you do not have to wait to put your question into the queue. You can do that throughout the hour as the spirit moves you, and we encourage you to do that. We really want to hear from you. If we run out of time and don't get your question, or sometimes it's just a question that's better addressed one-on-one, we will definitely follow up afterwards. So, as I said, please ask away. If you don't hear from us in the time we have today, we will definitely be following up. So please do weigh in. And I think that kind of brings me to the end of my little opening spiel here. Let me officially turn things over to Jost, who will really kind of get things rolling here. Jost, please take it away.
Thank you very much. So, looking at the list of participants, I think it's fair to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. And in addition to that, thank you very much to Appian, because Appian gives me the opportunity to talk a little bit about two of my favorite topics. And this is certainly on one side digital banking, and on the other side digital banking trends. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about digital banking. And I think one of the key topics when it comes to digital banking is certainly that there are so many different meanings, understandings, definitions of digital banking. And for the time being, let's have a quick look at what digital banking means, because I think that digital banking clearly goes beyond channels, and I think this is certainly something that is very important, because too many people think channels when they talk digital banking. So what does it mean from a historic perspective? Initially, banks maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago started with the online, the internet channel, and connected the channel to a couple of back-end solutions in some kind of very basic way. And after that, they probably added an additional channel, the mobile channel, in a very basic way again, maybe text messages, SMS, depending on the geography. And after that, they added additional capabilities, additional back-end solutions to create a broader approach toward the online channel and the mobile channel. And maybe over time they added further channels like the ATM, like IVR, etc., to create a broader digital experience. However, they clearly found that adding more and more back-end capabilities for a richer service offering for an improved customer experience certainly created challenges. Consequently, they had to do something to bring channels and back-end solutions together. This was definitely the point in time when they accepted the need for integration. In the early days, maybe a message broker. Today, in many cases, this would be needed. But this was not all. Over time, many financial services firms found that it's not only about isolated channels, they need an omni-channel solution to create a more comprehensive experience, an improved customer experience on one side. On the other side, they need to make the management of all of these channels from a UI perspective, for example, much more effective than they can manage this today. But this is not all. Leading banks certainly are also adding channel-specific business capabilities, be it a single view on the customer, in some cases certainly more than overdue, and in some cases they are coming up with very specific analytical capabilities, going for next best action, going for clear optimization of the overarching customer experience, or for some kind of analysis which channels are best suited for which products, just to offer a few examples. So consequently, leading banks consider all the components inside of this green box their omni-channel banking solution. And this is maybe why many people say this green box is digital banking. However, this is certainly not the only thing that needs to be done. Why that? Because customers expect more. They expect, for example, that when they deposit some cash in a bank branch, they see this deposit on the deposits account using their mobile device immediately after they leave the branch. And this is something that many old-fashioned core banking solutions, many old-fashioned back-end solutions cannot deliver. On top of that, such a kind of solution that focuses on the channels only does not deliver the data foundation to create the overarching basis for a great customer experience, for a great approach to increase revenue streams across various channels. And this is these are one or two of the reasons why Forrester says we need more. We need to arrive at an understanding of digital banking that we call true digital banking to indicate the broader understanding here. So that digital banking certainly needs a solid foundation of back-end solutions that all are also able to deliver in a flexible fashion, in close to real time, say near time, and certainly in a way that also offers sound product composition capabilities. What does it mean for banks? What does this kind of approach mean for banks? Let's have a look at key drivers for transformation. And when we look at these key drivers, we clearly see that banks need to consider quite a number of activities to cover top transformation drivers. What do I mean by top transformation drivers? It's basically about results from Forrester's most recent financial services architecture survey that showed a strong focus on North America and Europe. And this survey indicated that it is certainly mandatory to create a very engaging and great customer experience. But at the same point in time, it's also about improving channel support with some kind of broader approach toward omni-channel banking. But at the same point in time, maybe more in some geographies than others, it's also about innovative products and services, more agility, and certainly also compliance with regulatory requirements. All of these key transformation drivers bring us to a number of key topics. When financial services firms start planning their transformation, they come up with a variety of different functional areas where they would like to start their transformation, where they would like to invest first. So for our session today, I brought with me the top 7 initial focal points for this kind of digital transformation. And we found that, no surprise, omni-channel and cross-channel solutions in the financial services space and banking are certainly very important here. And at the same point in time, it's definitely about analytics, business intelligence, this kind of key component that I mentioned earlier. It's certainly about mobile banking, hopefully as being a part of the omni-channel approach, maybe with a mobile-first approach. It's definitely also about a modern core banking approach, but also about a supporting architecture that allows to bring all these different pieces together and that allows to drive a somewhat managed and certainly smooth migration approach. So I guess this is already indicating that the bandwidth of transformation programs includes the front end, the back end, and also additional capabilities like, for example, strong analytics, and maybe in some cases even more. And, for example, analytics based on artificial intelligence capabilities. We'll come back to that in a few seconds. So what does it all mean? These are until now at least, the descriptions of what financial services firms already determined for the next, say, 12 months. They described their major pains, the business drivers for digital transformation, and they also described where they would like to start their transformational journey. But what does it mean for the future? So let's have a look at the key financial services, key digital banking trends into 2018 that Forrester has identified. And these trends certainly do not come out of the blue. They are clearly related to further trends that emerged earlier on and that have accelerated, became stronger over time. So let's begin with the first. Let's begin with the first trend for 2018 beyond. The first one is certainly about a new operational model based on open banking, and open banking should certainly leverage API. When we talk about open banking, we define this as a fragmentation of the value chain in banking, supported by APIs. And this approach certainly demands collaboration with other banks, fintechs, other financial services firms that provide complementary products and services and technologies. But it also means to open the banking environment, for example, to developers that may create individual applications that offers the bank customers different and maybe even improved customer experience. And what is very important here, in some geographies, regulatory pressure is certainly pushing open banking. But I don't believe that this pressure alone will make open banking a reality. And many banks are now incorporating open banking in their business and technology strategies. And in the same survey I talked about earlier, we found that a larger number of banks already use APIs in a limited fashion or in a broader fashion today. Don't get me wrong here. This is certainly not yet something that the majority of banks globally do use today. Depending on how you count, we are arriving at 20, maybe even 30 or 40,000 banks and credit unions globally. So, and we are talking certainly about a way lower number of banks with operational APIs, but nevertheless, APIs will become a mandatory building block of target state architectures. And to give you one concrete example, Santander, for example, made becoming an open platform for financial services part of its global strategy and described this approach within its investor reports. So what does it mean from a technology side, from an impact perspective? We believe that certainly APIs are the key building block. You can already guess it based on my introduction. And these APIs are certainly meant to create an environment that will allow financial services firms, banks, to become both more flexible internally, because you can also use APIs internally, and to drive revenue, either via, for example, micro revenues with developer models, or by creating ecosystems with corporate customers and other partners. And this is certainly nothing absolutely new. Banks are already working on that, whether it's a bank in Europe, BBVA, whether it's a bank in the US, Capital One, or whether it's a bank in Asia, say DBS. We are seeing this around the world. But at the same point in time, the emerging specifications for APIs allow us to do more with APIs than, say, 10 years ago. And please don't get me wrong here. I deliberately avoided the word standards because I do not yet see standards in the banking API space. I see a number of activities and projects that are the candidates to deliver standards at some point in the future, but they are not yet. But the existing specifications today are not yet sufficiently rich, sufficiently broad, and they are certainly not yet standards. Let's move to the next topic. It's about revitalization of touch points. And what we are seeing here is that banks have virtually neglected customer relationships in their most popular touch points, for example, mobile and online banking, because they focus too much on transactions. And these applications work very nicely when it comes to transactions. But many banks put a too strong focus on channels, and consequently, banks need to revitalize touch points, to re-engage with their customers, even via digital channels. So at the same time, banks cannot afford to hire necessary staff to drive these relationships via one-to-one online chats, for example, or call center interactions at a given point in time within a necessary situation. So consequently, they need to focus on digital customer relationships that require fewer staff. And again, to give you an example, a Caixa Bank experimenting with combining big data and AI to deliver a great call center interaction without much human involvement. And what I heard until now, they are pretty happy with that. What does it mean from a technology impact perspective? We believe that you need to design for intelligent channels. And so it's certainly about leveraging AI, machine learning, natural language recognition, natural language generation, but to create more automatic and more intimate engagements. But at the same point in time, it's also about, for example, multimodal omnichannel, as in combining various physical channels like video, like co-browsing, like chat, into a single, much more powerful channel. And this is certainly a great way to move into this direction. And at the same time, we are seeing that social network integration is certainly something that many banks pursue, but it's not yet 100% the mainstream capability. Gamified applications and augmented reality are certainly at this point in time channels, additional touch points that do represent a relatively low priority for many banks. So it's really about combining these channels in innovative ways to create more engaging touch points. With that, let's move to the next topic. This is certainly about embracing analytics, leveraging data for true digital banking. And this is certainly about one of the foundations, I mentioned this earlier, of true digital banking. And it's about building solutions that do not only respond to information requests in near time, but it's also about analyzing customer behavior, products and service, and risk automatically when handling customer interactions. And I think this is very important because this will create a much more, let's say, individual perception of a given digital channel than it is possible for many banks, at least today. And so, to give you one example, one bank in the US is using analytics, in this case without AI, to better understand customer preferences online and close to real time, maybe even real time, and deliver tailored offers and services. This certainly means it's about driving true digital banking with a data foundation that helps us to create an agile, intelligent interaction with customers. And one of the tools to do so is certainly again, something from the AI space, robotic process automation, but there are also other capabilities that can be used in this space. And certainly banks need to be aware that they need to combine big data, business and risk analytics to basically harvest the full potential of digital banking. With that, let's move to trend number 4. We believe that it's not only about creating new and innovative products, it's also about creating more efficient products despite marketplace complexity. What do I mean by that? We found that many banks today work with many unprofitable products and services. And they have to face regulatory pressures. Many products have a poor cost-income ratio. And in some regions, for example in Europe, there are certainly challenges like low interest fees and interest fee margins. And in the financial services architecture survey I mentioned earlier, Forrester found that 38% of financial services firms consider product and service innovation a key driver for change. But at the same point in time, bank executives also identified that this topic is much more relevant for specific groups like high net worth individuals. So it will most likely be about product rationalization for the lower part of the customer pyramid, and definitely very individual, very customized products for the more interesting customers, down to the market of one. But at the same time, in all parts of the customer pyramids, efficiency will become even more essential to contain cost. And so it's really about topics that are related to certain kind of tool sets that many banks do not have in place today. So what we are saying is banks need to go for more modern product designers that help to design flexible products aligned with certain target audiences, maybe an umbrella configurator, an umbrella product designer that helps to cover multiple independent back-end capabilities. And certainly banks need to focus more on product calculation, because we find that many banks do not have a great grasp of the real cost of banking products and services today. So consequently, there's a broad range of capabilities that banks will need to work on if they want to compete with their leading peers in any given country. Just to mention that, given that we have a relatively mixed audience when it comes to regions, this trend, particularly when it comes to efficiency, not so much when it comes to product innovation, is certainly a little bit more visible in Europe, where we have too many products, while banks in North America clearly see they also need to focus on innovative products. And last but not least, we clearly have one additional topic here. This is definitely differentiation with convenient security. And some banks certainly view security as an unwelcome cost of doing business. However, the growing risk of internal and external threats to both the business and the bank's reputation makes security increasingly important. And just to give you one example, in Forrester's Financial Services Architecture Survey, we found that 52% of financial services firms perceive security as the number one obstacle for software as a service deployments. I'm not sure this is true. It's probably definitely more on the perception side, but I think it's a very interesting number here. So at the same time, banks certainly need to balance the need for strong security against business agility and the ease of use for customers. So it's again about great customer experience. And consequently, what we need is a much stronger focus on highly convenient biometric security mechanisms that won't hopefully be circumvented by alternative 4-digit lock-in approaches for mobile banking, just to use one. With that, I think I tried to cover the 5 key trends for 2018 in a comparably short time, and I hope this was interesting for you. As we mentioned earlier, we are happy to discuss these topics and all the other topics that we will discuss today later on. So I guess what remains to be said is keep in mind that that there's definitely the need to accept true digital transformation as in a change of the application landscape in banking that does not only focus on the front end but also embraces all kind of back-end capabilities to create the best possible customer experience and to drive revenue. With that, thank you very much for your interest until now, and with that, I think over to you, Michael.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jost. And before I get started, let me express my gratitude to American Banker and Forrester, and in particular Mike, Jost, and Christina for what's already shaping up to be a great webinar. My name is Mike Heffner. I'm going to take what Jost has teed up here in his research-driven, deep understanding of what's happening in banking globally, and I will add what I would think of as more of a practical perspective of those 5 key trends that we just heard about. So really, it's about how do we make that real? How do we get there? So I'll cover off at around the 5 trends that Jost had focused on around API. So I'll talk a little bit about enablers of API, but some of the challenges as well. Channels, I'll talk a little bit about value creation in channels and this idea of true digital banking. We couldn't agree more. That's where the next is, and that's where the true value generation for customers is going to come from. That's also where the efficiencies and the better response to GRC challenges is going to come from as well. I'll talk a little bit through data and about data. I think data is absolutely the cornerstone to any of the transformative things we're contemplating for next year and beyond. And ultimately, it's the mechanism for our customers and the industry to create uniqueness. We believe firmly, and our customers believe firmly, that in order to compete, it's about creating your own unique identity and voice, and then have the ability to actually execute against the vision. So more to come on that. I'll talk a little bit about innovation as well and what we're seeing as the cornerstones of innovation around making it real, but then also creating feedback loops that allow our customers to very, very quickly adjust and be nimble as they're contemplating the future from a product and service perspective. And then ultimately, I love the example of biometric, but let's be honest, it's really about future-proofing. How do you protect the investments that you're making now so they're relevant in the future? I'm not going to talk a lot about Appian itself. I will introduce a couple of ideas around Appian. Ultimately, what I'm talking about is how do we enable this future, and modern platform tools such as Appian, I think, are extremely well positioned to help make that future come about. So with that said, let's focus on how do we get there. Let's start with this idea of API banking. I think in certain regions of the world, we're a bit closer than others. Certainly, PSD2 in Europe is a great driver. Ultimately, we agree with Jost and generally in engaging with our customers on their digital transformation agendas, we agree that directionally this is where things are going. It was great actually to hear Jost mention some of our customers earlier in the earlier segment. I think ultimately modern platforms like Appian's enable the shift to API, but here are the cautions. Right, the cautions are that for the most part, we're not banks are not in a position where we are given the latitude to start greenfield. And even in those examples, we do have a couple of examples where customers have stood up greenfield businesses from scratch. Even then, they still had to integrate with legacy. So the idea is, how do we innovate around API? How do we create these ecosystems that are all about value and self-sustaining, but let's be completely pragmatic that banking is a regulated industry and should be, and therefore we have unique responsibilities to the countries, the businesses, the environments that we operate into, and to be able to control those environments that we create that include potentially API-based solutions. The other reality here is the pragmatic check here is that as you're creating value via open API banking, you're still responsible for understanding the end-to-end transaction life cycles. And that requires a whole lot of integration between the new and the old. So how do you get there? How do you create this integration layer that really focuses on holistically understanding transactions as they traverse your bank and assure accountability? The other piece here is, Jost mentioned this earlier, APIs are externally facing but also internally facing, but the reality is most banks have been built over decades and really include a mix of technologies. There's plenty of COBOL still around, in a mix of technologies that also are vended, that are less modern. So how do you deal with that? How do you still create the accountability for an end-to-end transaction, yet deal with a mix of technologies, some modern, some not modern? We think it's a great combination for Appian to own the end-to-end transactional lifecycle, and then some other technologies like RPA to come into play to begin to automate and integrate some of that last mile to some of those more black box legacy technologies, which are also over time going to get rewritten into a more modern standard. So lots of opportunity in the ROI space, modern technologies, achieving ROI out of API. Modern technologies enable that transition, enable the shift towards API-based banking by combining old and new, but doing so in a controlled environment. So switching gears just a little bit here towards this idea of intelligent channels, and I loved Jost's graphic earlier. We completely agree. It's about front to back. It's no longer about having a nice front end. I think that was the gut instinct. Mobile enable, desktop enable. It's really about how do you create a single view, how do you aggregate information that exists inside and outside of the organization in the full ecosystem. You know, visibility and traceability and accountability for transactions gets a lot harder when you start having to engage on not just your customer, but your customer's customer, and really understand the full value chain. This is, we completely agree, is the true definition of digital banking. It's an integration of front to back. It's not just purely saying we have to go completely paperless, for example. I often hear this, isn't digital transformation just going paperless? It kind of is, but, you know, again, being completely pragmatic in certain jurisdictions with certain products, you're still going to deal with the legal requirements that come along with maintaining documents and wet signatures, for example. So really, true digital transformation is about the joining together of paper and digital in such a way that digital is highly efficient and effective, and you're not slowing down, rather you're integrating with legacy, so you can control the transaction life cycle. This is the lifeblood. Data is the lifeblood. It's interesting. we were just at Sibos in Toronto just a short while ago, and it was always a great forum, so many bankers globally coming together to talk about what's next. And what emerged was this theme that we're all worried about digital transformation and how to get there, but universally we all agreed that data is the lifeblood of that transformation. But it's not just data. There's lots of raw data that exists in lots of different places. It's about how to join data, insight, and action into something that's meaningful. Jost talked about earlier this idea of harvesting value, this idea of how do you create offers around next best action. How do you create education for your contact center workforce so they understand the appropriate next steps to take. So it's a very complicated environment. Ultimately, while we start talking about new technologies like AI and machine learning, and certainly big data is a big part of this, the part that often gets overlooked is action. We think being able to, in one platform, join data, insight, and action, and being able to execute and offer guidance in the moment, which is really all that matters, because that's where it's most important. That's where you have those moments in truth, is enabled via modern platform technology. So this is incredibly important from an enabling perspective. One aspect that we're seeing is the definition of data is changing. It's no longer about the data that may exist in the four walls of the bank. It's now about the data that exists with the entire ecosystem of service providers and partners, but then also the data that exists in the universe itself. So we have customers that are bringing into, for example, credit decisions, data from social. So how do you integrate all that? And then again, how do you drive insight and get to action all in the same platform, which is really what we think is innovative and different and gets to harvesting value. And AI may not be part of that right from the get-go. It may take a while to get to AI, but how do you create a foundation for all of that and begin to future-proof now? This idea of innovation is interesting. We just hosted a conference globally with some amazing speakers, and the theme of innovation kept coming up. And what I found really interesting is the shift from, we used to always talk about fail fast. So now it's shifting to learn fast, spend small, and we couldn't agree more. But innovation has to also be practical. It's got to be real. I love Jost's comment around understanding real costs. Being able to articulate the cost of an entire value chain, including integration with legacy, is incredibly important. So we have customers that are leveraging our low-code, rapid development capabilities that really enable business visionaries to partner shoulder to shoulder with IT and very rapidly create solutions and products that are real world. And real world means they integrate back with the legacy environment. Creating something on an island doesn't really begin to denote the real challenges that come with being in a regulated industry and then ultimately having to ensure that anything you put out there has visibility, accountability, traceability back. So we're extremely excited about what's happening around innovation and rapid innovation right now. We have customers, I'm thinking of one particular customer in the Netherlands who is literally standing up a digital bank with a team of less than 5 folks, and they're rapidly creating experiences. The idea of innovation and immediately seeing something come to life, and then being able to integrate real-life data, and then being able to adjust and adapt to what you're learning, back to this idea of learn fast, is, I think, where all of this is going. So real prototyping in a low-code environment where the technology is no longer an impedance, the technology is an enabler. But for banks, it needs to be real, and in order to make it real, it needs to integrate with the legacy environment. I'm having a lot of fun right now with my brand new iPhone and Face ID, which is fantastic. Jost talked about biometrics, and it's the latest whiz-bang gadget, and I'm completely excited about it. My son is probably more excited about it than I am. I see him playing with it quite a bit. But ultimately, the message here is you can't just future-proof for what's next. You have to future-proof for what's next. And we don't know. So modern technology platforms allow you to not box yourself in. Modern technology platforms actually allow you to adapt very quickly without having to rebuild your existing architecture. And that's certainly true for biometric things like Face ID, but it's also true for, just core process banking capabilities as well. It's ultimately about future-proofing your investments so you're not ripping, replacing, and starting over every time something new surfaces. I said I was going to talk about Appian a lot. This is sort of the main Appian slide. I was going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing around true digital banking, and each one of these customers is doing work in that space. Ultimately, we're seeing engagement with our modern technology platform in banking around three major domains. One is this idea of true digital banking, integrating omni, but also truly integrating front, middle, and back. So that transactional life cycle, creating visibility and accountability, integrating technologies like RPA, like AI, but still maintaining visibility and control end-to-end for a transaction life cycle as it traverses the bank. So those transaction life cycle use cases are front and center with our customers. What hasn't gone away and isn't going away is how do we become more efficient? How do we eliminate some of the things that are happening due to our legacy environment where we still have our internal agents, and in some cases customers dealing with dozens of different systems in order to achieve a single outcome. So how do you aggregate? How do you create a digital overlay? How do you get exposure to one interface that allows the customer, allows the servicing agent to execute a transaction much more efficiently with higher precision as well. So lots of those use cases, and they're very compelling. And then third, GRC. It's not going away, but I think the mandates around GRC are changing, where it's becoming much more holistic. It's less siloed than it used to be. So it's more about understanding your customers and their customers and the full ecosystem of service providers, understanding what products and services they're consuming and what are they doing with those products and services, and being able to understand that holistically and act and monitor and action against issues is where GRC is going, and we're clearly helping. So transaction lifecycle, efficiency, and GRC continue to be major themes, and we're lucky enough to have great references across the spectrum of banking and capital markets globally. I would like to sort of echo Jost's last point, which is, we're here now. This is real. If you're already engaging, that's great. I see a couple of our customers are actually on this webinar. I'm excited to see that as well. If you're still on the sidelines wondering if this is real, it is. So I would echo Jost's point, engage now. We're ready to work with you. We're excited to hear about your unique strategy. How are you going to achieve uniqueness in this industry? And we're standing at the ready to help. And we're very much aligned with, the future trends around 2018 and beyond. With that, I'm going to hand it to Mike, I believe, who's going to surface a couple of questions we've already gotten.
Indeed I am. Thank you very much, Mike. And we've got about 10 minutes, and that's good. That's a good amount of time. We've got a couple of good questions in the queue, and just reminding everyone that if you've got something that's on your mind, now would be definitely the time to pop it into the queue for us. So let's kick things off with this question. How will digital transformation enable my bank to become more efficient and agile?
Michael, would you like to give it a start, or should I go?
I'd love to give it a start. So I think we have to be pragmatic here. I think the reality is that our banking architectures are complex. There's a lot of legacy. However, banks don't have the latitude, in most part, to build ROIs and business cases to just start from scratch. That's just a highly unusual use case. So we have to deal with it. So ultimately, when you look at where non-value-added activities, so inefficient activities live within banks, those non-value-added activities tend to be sort of at those transition spaces where, I'm working in a process or a transaction, and I have to log on to 17 systems to get anything done. All of those log-ons, all of those interactions are complete non-value add. So being able to eliminate those, I think is hitting on the multiple objectives. It certainly makes processes more efficient. It focuses on where is their actual value creation, but it also makes them more less prone to error and risk. Jost, you want to add some thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. So my view is that digital transformation is simply a tool to become exactly what the question is asking about. The tool for a bank to become more efficient and agile. Why that? I've already mentioned the COBOL systems, the fragmented landscape in banking as far as applications are concerned. And when we look at typical digital transformation initiatives, we certainly find that at least when it comes to exposing internal capabilities to the outside world, whether it is via channels or channels combined into great customer touchpoints, this comes with some kind of restructuring of the overarching architecture of a given bank. Because you need at least integration points, maybe and hopefully a bank comes up with APIs that can be consumed by the outside world, whether it's a web API or a B2B API or something. So digital transformation comes with certain architectural artifacts that help to become more agile. We also touched a different topic earlier on in both parts of our presentations, saying it's not only about making capabilities available to the outside world, it's also about changing the way how capabilities are delivered internally. What I'm seeing in many banks is certainly that this digital transformation process also breaks open let's use Michael's example, the COBOL silos, so that, and maybe does not necessarily replace these silos immediately, but adds additional capabilities so that we have a more decoupled, a more cohesive application landscape that allows for faster, more agile support of business change. And I think this is exactly where digital transformation comes into play, particularly if a bank or any other company understands digital transformation in the way of true digital, as in embracing the front and the back end. I think this is exactly where the value comes in, and this is also why Forrester suggests to move to target state architecture that we call digital core banking as opposed to traditional core banking. Back to you.
Interesting. Thank you both. Great. All right, let's see. Next question here. Also, I'll just kind of toss it out to both you guys to weigh in on. Let's see. Typical organizations spend a majority of their IT budget maintaining existing systems. That leaves limited resources available for innovation. What would you recommend as a strategic direction to help solve this?
Yeah, it's Mike. Absolutely. I mean, this is not a new problem. We've been talking about sort of 80%, 20% for a while. I think, based on what I'm seeing, I don't have any hard data on this, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more like 90 versus 10%. So 90% going towards spending just to keep the lights on, and 10% around innovation. I think this is where the reality sets in around what's happening at a macro level within technology. The truth is that we are seeing uniqueness and differentiation more and more coming through software. The phrase software is eating the world has been around for a while, but I think we're actually seeing it now more than ever, is for companies, whether they're banks or manufacturers or the chain of coffee shops, for those entities to create uniqueness in their business model, in how they create experiences for their customers, and how they compete on value, in how they compete on their architecture, requires software, the building and maintaining of software. Yet, at a macro level, the number of developers that are entering the workforce is staying relatively flat. So you have a disconnect. You've got a hockey stick pattern around the development of applications and software, yet you have a flat supply of the traditional craftsmen and women that would create that software. This is where low-code comes into play. This is where this idea of rapidly developing software applications with low-code, reusable, quick to assemble, quick to change software will make all the difference.
And maybe to add one or two aspects here, we also have to look at the development of banking software, particularly in the off-the-shelf space. And if we look back, say, 5 or 6 or 7 years, many banking software vendors promised a lot of agility, a lot of ability to reduce the maintenance share of this 70-30 or 90-10 ratio Michael mentioned earlier. Certainly depends on the bank, but to reduce the maintenance share here. However, and they promised this by saying, hey, we have components, and you can flexibly combine these components, you can replace existing business capabilities, you can reduce maintenance costs. And most vendors, most off-the-shelf banking software vendors, did not fully live up to that promise, because many of them simply renamed existing modules and said, hey, we now have a component. And this is certainly not the way to go. However, now the situation has changed. And I think what we are seeing today is that both, in this case, both in the off-the-shelf world, it's in off-the-shelf banking software vendors, and the custom-built world, more and more firms, banks and vendors, are accepting that they need to focus on microservices to create a much more, let's say, easy to build and easy to deploy and easy to change environment that allows them to support the rapid change that's the banking industry.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you both again. And let's see here. We are getting very close to the top of the hour here, but I think we have time for one more question. So let me throw this one at you, gentlemen. Does Appian offer a fraud detection risk management platform as part of your offering? Is it machine learning based or rules based? I guess that's mostly a question for Mike.
Yeah, happy to answer that. That's a great question. We absolutely, as part of our platform, and customers are leveraging the Appian platform this way, are managing complex fraud, AML cases via Appian. We have the ability to integrate machine learning. We're having lots of great discussions around that topic with customers. Customers haven't gone live yet. It's not a technology constraint. I think it's more of a business policy constraint. I think there's still a bit of, and this will likely go away over time, but a little bit of a ongoing concern within the banking industry around who's checking the checker, right? So how do we ensure that models don't go off the rails? But for us, our sweet spot, our core strength is the ability to effectively case manage fraud, and then not only manage those events to conclusion within the regulatory windows, et cetera, but then also feed what we're learning about false positives back into the detection mechanisms. So it's an interesting, evolving space. AI will be part of it, and we're having those discussions. It's not right now.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And I think that is a perfect note to end on. I've got right at the top of the hour here, and we do love to be punctual, respecting everyone's busy days. But let me thank Jost and Mike for a great hour, really a really robust session with lots of great content and lots of great questions from the audience. Thank you, everyone, for putting those questions in and being here today with us. Please also, everyone that's with us, keep an eye out in your inbox because we're going to be sending you a follow-up email the next day or two that will have a link to the recording of this session as well as a PDF version of the slides. So you can sort of, you'll have that whole package to review in the future at your leisure. We encourage you to do that because there's a lot of good content here. And with that, I will wrap it up. Wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope you'll join us again here very soon. Thanks so much.